Okay, 1 Samuel. Resume our discussion of the life of King David. 1 Samuel chapter 18. We will pick up. We finished off the mighty giant Goliath last week, and that was the first and most popular event of David's life, I believe. And I want to touch on one more thing. We had talked about, David being the only one to step up. And if you look at the first verse of chapter 17, the Philistines gathered together their armies, and then in verse 2, Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together. It doesn't give us an actual number. And I didn't look into great detail into this, didn't look very deeply, but I Googled how many men were in 1 Samuel 17, men of Israel, and you just get all kinds of numbers. But if you turn over to chapter 24, flip over to chapter 24, and we have a number there, but there's not a war. Saul is chasing David all over the country. I mean, this chapter we're going to study tonight, chapter 18, Saul is chasing David everywhere. David's running for his life. And here in chapter 24, it came to pass when Saul was returned from following the Philistines that it was told him, saying, Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel. So there we have 3,000 men, and they were chosen men, his best warriors, to go with him. Now, I take that, and I don't have anything to base this on, but I take that there were at least that many in 1 Samuel chapter 17. At least 3,000 Israelite men getting ready to go battle against the Philistines, against Goliath, at least. And there were numbers in the six figures when you Google this and look. There were, you get all kind. Well, let's just say there's 3,000. Okay, let's just take the low end, which there was probably more than that. They were all greatly afraid. In verse 11 and in verse 24, they were sore afraid. All of them. And here comes the 16-year-old shepherd boy, and he's the only one to step up. I just wanted to start this class out by a little numbers game, okay? Just to give you an idea of at least 3,000 men, not a one of them, not even the leader, stepped up. But David did, the youngest of the bunch, and he wasn't even 20 years old. He wasn't even old enough to be in the military, but he was the only one to step up. James.
Well, he said these were chosen men, the best. Well, then they could have been 20,000 more, that wasn't the best. So we could just throw any number.
That's my point.
Yeah,
We can
say it's 10 million, but here we did say 3. We know there's 3,000.
Exactly. Mike.
Well, the collective number, there probably was bravery, but they knew that Goliath was wanting the Israelites to send out their champion to fight against him, and none of those, however many there were, individually felt like they could in any way compete on even keel with Goliath. And so they were all afraid. They were all hoping that I hope nobody volunteers me.
Exactly. But David stepped up. I love that story. Any other questions before we bury Goliath? Chapter 18, this begins the fallout between the two. And let's read verses 1 through 9 Who wants? Bo, will you read verses 1 through 9 of chapter 18, please?
And when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him go home to his father's house any more. And Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan took off the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armor, giving to his sword and his bow and his belt. But David went out wherever Saul sent him and behaved wisely. Saul sent him over the men of war. He was accepted in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Now it happened as they were coming home when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistines, that the women had come out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. So the women sang as they danced and said, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very angry, and it displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed only thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul eyed David from that day forth.
Okay, thank you. My first question is, what was David's... Now, well, the first 4 verses, Jonathan, it talks about Jonathan and David's relationship, their friendship. And either at the end of this class or the first of next week's class, we're going to talk about the value of true friendship. I didn't put any questions here, but we're going to talk about David and Jonathan after we finish chapter 18. Okay? So I'm going to skip over that, but we're going to come back to it. But my first question was, what was David's new role after he returned, and how did he conduct himself? Saul set him as what? He set him over his men of war. Look at it like the Secretary of Defense or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, a military position, an important military position. And Saul set him over that, and he behaved himself wisely. A talented young man, and he was accepted, I'm in verse 5. He was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So you've got a young man here that his fame has taken off unlike any other. And not only the people, but the people working under Saul realizes it. And he's conducting himself wisely. At 16 years old. He's 16. What were the Israelite women, what was Israel's reaction, or the women, to David's victory? What were they singing and dancing? What were they saying? A popular statement, popular phrase we see often. Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And, you can see them out in the streets dancing with their tambourines, their bells, singing. And they're giving both men praise. They're praising both of them. But they're really overloading David. And they're not giving Saul what he thinks he deserves. And it doesn't set well at all. And they're joyfully doing this. They're coming off of a great victory where, had it not been for David and the Lord being behind them, they were in for sure defeat. And they all knew that. They knew that. And here they are. They're singing and dancing in the streets with great joy. And they're praising both of these men. They're giving respect to both of them. And everybody appreciates it except Saul. Giving a little bit more. Giving him a little bit more. Mm-hmm. That's right. And how does Saul, my next question, how does Saul, question 5, no, question 3, what was Saul's reaction to this event? When he heard them singing, what does it say? He was very angry. He was very angry. And he kept hearing that in the back. I could just see him. You ever hear a song that you just kind of, in the back of your mind, you hear it on the radio and in the mornings, and you sing it all day long? I mean, it's just stuck in the back. Well, you ever get a song that you just can't stand, but you still listen to it, and you sing it all day long, and you think, I hate this song, but I keep singing it. Well, I see Saul like this. He hears these women out here singing and dancing. Saul has slain his 10,000s, David his 10,000s, and he can't get it out of his mind. And it's driving him nuts. He's getting mad, and he doesn't know what to do. Did you raise your hand? No. And he has the anger, you remember when he was chosen to be king, how was he described when he was chosen to be king? You remember? He was the choicest. He was the choice pick. There was nobody higher, taller. He was handsome. He was our 5-star recruit. Remember we was talking about that? And here, a 16-year-old kid is getting more praise than he is. James.
One of the things he couldn't do is turn to God because he displeased God on different occasions. So he didn't have God to go to, or wouldn't he wouldn't go to God anyhow. That maybe helped him do that.
Right. He could have, but he didn't. He could have, but he didn't. And the text says he wasn't wroth. He wasn't angry. He was very angry in verse 8. And the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have only ascribed but thousands. Poor me. Poor me. Jacob.
One thing that I noticed very, applicable to our life is that what Saul's doing is he's realizing he's comparing himself to David, and he's completely lost sight of why David is getting the praise in the first place, I guess you would say, because in our lives we compare ourselves to other people. Say, wow, they did song leading much better than I did. They're getting a lot more better praise than I do. And then they completely lose the fact, completely lose the meaning behind what a song leader is even doing. And I think that that's what a lot of it, Saul has forgotten that David did this for God. He didn't do this to get the praise, and that's what Saul was doing things for, just to get praise. And so I think it's led to jealousy, and then of course it leads to anger and envy, and that's how I take it constantly.
Well, that's how it is. That's exactly the picture that's drawn here of Saul. And he's got his priorities are totally 180 degrees going in the wrong direction. And how should he have reacted to this event? How should he have reacted to David killing this giant?
Joyful. They did it for God's glory.
The battle belongs to the Lord. The battle belongs to the Lord. But he didn't. He's so full of pride and jealousy that he did not do it. David pulled him out of a tight spot. That's right. Daryl.
Well, Goliath went from being Saul's enemy to David being his enemy. And so the threat
Exactly. That's right. That's exactly right. I've got a verse here after reading this chapter. You know, it says in verse 5 that David behaved himself wisely. How many other times in this chapter do we find that term? Did anybody look? And every time it's found, it's referring to whom? Verse 5, look at verse 14. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. And look at verse 15. Look who notices it. Saul saw that he behaved himself wisely, and he was afraid of him. Verse 30, one more time, at the end of that latter half of that verse, that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul. So, the scene is set here in chapter 18 that's going to that sets the tone for the rest of this book, for the rest of Saul's life. And it's not what should be an excellent relationship. It's a disastrous relationship, and it's all one-sided. That's the thing about it. Usually when you have two friends that have a falling out, a lot of times there's fault on both ends, but sometimes there's not. But here in this one, there's only fault on one end. David has no fault whatsoever with this fallout with Saul. He respects him. He loves him. And we're going to find out in the next lesson, he's going to prove that at the cave. Ricky.
I think there's some interesting things going on. We hear the women sing. We see a number that they're equating to him just off the first battle he's involved in. But if you go back and look at how the message went about across the countries, the different countries, we know that people outside these other countries have already started hearing about David, fearing him even at 16 years old. And you know, Saul had, even though he was jealous, had to respect him because he went up and took his giant. And you see how much he respected him because he took 3,000 choice men after him. He wasn't brave enough to go in with this small team to take him. So there was a tremendous amount of respect growing. And we know God was blessing David. He already had anointed him. But this was, David was doing it without fear.
Exactly. Faith. A man of faith. A man after God's own heart. Verse 9, after reading verse 9, and we've mentioned some of the terms here, give me your own term that would best describe Saul at this point, at this juncture. What term would best describe Saul? Jealousy? What else? Weary of David? Broken? Anger? Envious? What else? Prideful? Those are all correct. Let's look the next section of Scripture, let's read verses 10 through 16. Ricky Barnett, can you do that, please, sir? 10 through 16.
And it happened on the next day, the distressing spirit of God came upon Saul, and he prophesied inside the house. So David played music with his hand as the other time. There was a spear in Saul's hand. Saul cast the spear, where he said, I will pin David to the wall. David escaped his presence twice. Now Saul was afraid of David because David was with him and had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from his presence and made his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved wisely in all his ways. And the Lord was
Okay. Here we have the first attempt of Saul to kill David. And here comes that evil spirit again, knocking on the door. And David's got his harp out, playing his harp to ease his feeling, his saddened heart. And he reaches over for his sword, his javelin, and threw it at David, and he missed him. And he did it again. He did it twice. The text says he said it twice, and he missed him both times. And Saul's a warrior himself. I mean, he's not like, this is not his first time to throw a javelin or a spear. This is not his first time to do this, and he missed him both times. And look at verse 12. If that would have happened, you've got the king of Israel, who, I don't know exactly how old he is at this time, but we know about how old David is. And verse 12 says Saul was afraid of David. It would seem like the opposite. It would seem like David would be afraid of Saul because he just tried to kill me. He's the king, and he threw a sword at me trying to kill me. But he did it twice. But the text says Saul was afraid of David. Why? Because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. The Lord was with David, yet not with Saul. Saul had closed the door of his heart because of jealousy and pride and all those other terms that y'all gave me a while ago. And here David is, and Saul is afraid of David. And verse 13, Saul removed him from him and made him his captain, gave him another promotion, made him his captain over 1,000. And it says here he went out, and my next question is, question 6, what does the phrase he went out and came in before them mean? And it says it in verse 13, and it says it again in verse 16. But all Israel and Judah loved David, verse 16, because he went out and came in before them. What does that mean? What do you think that means? Took them to battle and back. A true leader is not going to ask anything of you that he would not be willing to do himself. And those people knew it. Both Israel and Judah knew that. They knew what they just met this kid, but they find out real quick what kind of man he is. And they know that he's a man of authority, one, and he's not going to command them to do anything that he would not be willing to do himself. I saw Daryl.
Yeah, it's too bad he didn't keep that same philosophy, because later on in the story of Bathsheba, he was not where he was supposed to be.
Exactly. James.
David led his people. Leader can't lead from the rear. They got to lead
From
from the front.
the front. That's exactly right. What does that version say again, Fred? He what? He
It says he made David captain of a regiment. David led the troops out to battle and back again.
Okay. He led them and he brought them back. He cared for them. He loved them. He cared for them. He didn't hide anything from them. You know, I read into that phrase that when he's leading the people into battle, he's going to tell them exactly how it's going to be. And he said, the Lord's going to be with us, but it may get ugly. I mean, he's not hiding anything. He's putting all cards on the table, and he's letting them know. And they respect him for it. A great leader will do that. A great leader he'll gain respect from his members by doing this. Verse 17 through verse 21. Let's read that section. Kevin, are you there? 17 through 21.
And Saul said to David,
Behold, my elder daughter Merab, her will I give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles. And Saul said, Let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. And David said unto Saul, Who am I, and what is my life, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given unto Adriel, Meholathites, to wife. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and David told Saul everything pleased him. And Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in the one of the 20.
Okay. Well, Saul tried to kill him, was unsuccessful. And all the people, Saul knows that all the people, even his own the people working under him, love David. All the people of Judah, all the people of Israel love David. And I see Saul, a light bulb go off. Hey, I'll give him my daughter to marry. And that way, I'll get him then. In verse, when he read verse 21, I will give him her that she may be a what? A snare to him. He's wanting to trap him. He can't do it himself, so he's going to give him one of his daughters to try to kill him. Let the Philistines do it. Take his mind off of what he's doing. It says in the text that I will give him her that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. And it says the same thing over in verse 25. But Saul fought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So, and I don't know why. Verse 17 says he first gave him his older daughter Merab, and then that fell through. Verse 19, Merab married somebody else. So Michal, his second daughter, loved David. Saul wouldn't want that. He wouldn't want somebody to love him. But she loved him, and he went ahead and gave her to him. So he's trying to set the snare to where the Philistines will kill David. And he tells his messengers, he tells his men, Saul tells his men to go to David and to say, you need to marry the king's daughter. He's given her to you. You need to marry her. You have a bunch of privileges being the king's son-in-law. It'll be great. You need to do that. Trying to set him up. And they say, kill 100 Philistines and take her. Well, David went out and killed not 100. He killed 200 and brought back the proof and laid it before Saul. So it was all over. I mean, Saul became the husband of his daughter, and his daughter loved him. And in verse 28, Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And my next question number 8, fill in the blank. Saul became David's what? Continually. What? Enemy. Saul became David's enemy continually. You know, my daughter loves him. My son, that's his best friend. I mean, they are best friends. We're going to talk about that some more. Probably going to be next week. And all my people that work under me love him. All of Judah and all of Israel love him and respect him. It would seem like a person that has those cards against him, it seemed like they would have an about face and change their prideful heart and turn back to the Lord. But Saul doesn't. Michael, then J.R.
What's that line? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah,
And that's what Saul was doing.
exactly. That's exactly right. J.R.
My point is what we've already said, jealousy. It eats up the person that has it. And that's what Saul seems to have. Terrible jealousy because the young boy is so successful.
At this point, nobody hates David except Saul. Nobody. It's eating him up. And go back to the physical stature of Saul and the how he's built. I mean, he's huge and he's nice looking. And you know he's been like that a long time, and pride has to eat at you. It's got to be a temptation. I'm not tall, so I've never had that temptation thrown at me of being tall and handsome, okay? But Saul has. And the physical attributes of him top anybody. And somebody, a teenager, a mid-teenage kid comes along and steals his notoriety. Completely tears it out of his life.
David wasn't doing it with malice.
No, not a bit. Saul was bringing it all on himself. That was not David's intent. David's intent to this point is to please the Lord. He's a warrior, and he's wanting to please the Lord.
Saul thought he was fighting against David. He could just get rid of David. His life would be great. He wasn't fighting against David. He was fighting against God.
He was fighting against the Lord. And you know, back when Saul tried to kill him, and when I first studied this, and it said Saul was afraid of David, I thought the printers in my Bible messed. It would seem like David would have been afraid of Saul, but no, Saul was afraid of him. I know it. I know it. That's right. My next question, given David's instant success and fame, what would some have been tempted to do who were not after God's own heart? Given instant success and fame such as this, a teenager,
Saul to take his kingdom.
be just like Saul,
He likes Saul, kill him, okay? I got his kingdom.
just exactly like Saul. Yet David remained submissive to the king. My last question, do you think David had any idea at this point of his life? Do you think he had any idea of what the following days, months, and years were going to bring? I don't think he had a clue. He couldn't have. He was going to take it one day at a time, and the battle belongs to God, not me. The battle belongs to the Lord. Whatever one day may bring, whatever tomorrow brings, if I remain faithful to God, He'll take care of it. Next week, we're going to talk about verses 1 through 4 of chapter 18. We're going to talk about the value of good friendship, of true friendship. And we're going to look at Jonathan, the friendship of Jonathan and David. And I want you to get a dictionary and define when it says the soul of Jonathan was knit, in verse 1, was knit to the soul of David. Those two souls were knit together. Define that and bring that with you next week. And we're going to talk about that next week. And if we get through with that in time, we will go to lesson number 4. What we're going to do is after we talk about Jonathan and David, we're going to fast forward to chapter 24. Chapters 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. Saul is chasing David all over the country. Everywhere he's chasing him. And Saul is escaping with his life. And we'll touch on some of those verses, but we're not going to spend a great detail. But we're going to bring everything, with that in mind, we're going to bring it to chapter 24, where they finally meet up again in chapter 20, in the cave in Gedi. There was a cave, I think that pronounced that correctly. But thanks for your questions and comments tonight.